A beloved children's YouTuber is mourning the loss of his son. Daniel Coleman, who created and performs as Danny Go, revealed on his Instagram May 22nd that his 14-year-old son Isaac has passed away from a battle with cancer.
There are moments online that stop your scroll completely. Moments where a single Instagram post turns a stranger into someone whose pain you carry around for the rest of the day. On a quiet Friday morning, a beloved YouTube dad sat down and shared two simple dates beside a single name. And millions of parents around the world suddenly felt the weight of 14 years of love, fear, and silent courage pressing down on their chests. You'll feel the same in a few minutes. The Friday morning that broke the internet. On the 22nd of May, 2026, Daniel Coleman, the creator of the wildly popular Danny Go YouTube channel, did something he had never wanted to do in his entire life. He opened up his Instagram, picked out two photos of his oldest son, Isaac, and typed out a message that would travel around the world before lunchtime. The post began with a name and two dates written side by side. Isaac Daniel Coleman, born on the 3rd of October, 2011, and gone on the 21st of May, 2026. 14 years and 7 months sat between those two numbers, and that single line held the entire visible math of a life that had contained more battles than most of us will face across a full lifetime. You can probably imagine what Daniel wrote next, but reading the actual words still hits you like a slow brick to the chest. He called Isaac his sweet boy. He admitted there was so much he wanted to say, but he simply did not know how just yet. He talked about looking through thousands of pictures and feeling tremendous pride underneath the pain. He said his son had met every challenge with grit. He said being Isaac's dad had been the honor of a lifetime. Here is the part that probably caught you the way it caught me. He used the words trademark joy to describe his son, almost like joy was something Isaac had patented and given away for free. If you have ever watched a Danny Go video with your kids, you already know exactly where Daniel learned to think about joy that way. Within hours, the post was shared by NBC News, E! News, Variety, and dozens of local stations across America. Ms. Rachel from Songs for Littles posted her own tribute and asked her enormous audience to lift the family up. Blippi commented directly under the original post and called Isaac the bravest knight he had ever heard of. Parents across TikTok began streaming Danny Go videos on a quiet loop in their kitchens, hoping to push some ad revenue toward a family they knew was about to lose almost all of its income. But here is something most people did not notice in that first wave of reactions. The smiling photo in the tribute had been taken less than a month earlier, and the post that Daniel had quietly published 30 days before, that Friday morning, had already prepared the closest fans for what was now happening. The April post that nobody wanted to read. Let me take you back to the 23rd of April, 2026. Daniel had been mostly quiet for several weeks at that point. His usual rhythm of regular health updates about Isaac had slowed down noticeably, and that silence had started to scare a lot of people who had been following the story since the beginning. When he finally returned to Instagram that Thursday, he did something that, looking back now, feels almost defiantly hopeful. He posted a full carousel of brand new professional family photos. Daniel, his wife Mindy, Isaac, and their younger son Levi, all dressed up, all smiling, all clearly making the most of a moment they understood was rare. He mentioned in the caption that Isaac had asked for an extra costume change during the shoot. Read that detail one more time. A 14-year-old boy, exhausted from cancer and weak from spreading disease, had asked for one more outfit because he wanted the pictures to feel special. If you are a parent, that small moment probably wrecks you a little. It wrecked me too. The actual update written underneath those photos was the part that fans had been silently bracing for. Daniel explained that Isaac's cancer was continuing to spread aggressively through his body. His energy levels had dropped very low. The family was in the middle of a short round of palliative radiation, which is a gentler kind of radiation aimed at slowing down a tumor rather than trying to cure it. There was now a visible mass beneath Isaac's right eye. And then came the sentence that almost everyone had quietly feared for months. Daniel wrote that Isaac had a hospice team on board now to help manage the pain. He explained that the family had shifted to a comfort-focused approach overall. Anyone who has ever sat in a doctor's office and heard those words knows what they really mean. Hospice is the soft language we use when nobody wants to say the harder word out loud. What very few people understood when they read that April update was that Daniel had already pulled the emergency brake on his entire career almost 3 months earlier. Because back in February, the news from a single pathology report had been so devastating that he did something almost nobody in his industry ever does at the peak of their success. The February decision that shocked the tour world. The February turn in this story is honestly one of the hardest stretches to sit with. On the 7th of January, 2026, Isaac had gone in for what his family had been told would be a major step toward beating the cancer. It was a surgery scheduled for 8 long hours. The doctors were going to remove the tumor along with any tissue around it that looked suspicious. But once the surgical team got inside Isaac's mouth, the picture changed quickly. The cancer had quietly spread further than the scans had managed to pick up. The surgeons ended up removing several teeth along with a significant amount of tissue from inside his mouth. They also had to take a large skin graft from Isaac's leg in order to rebuild the soft tissue where the cancer had been growing. The lead surgeon told the family afterwards that he was worried they had not gotten all of it cleanly. That worry turned out to be heartbreakingly correct. A few weeks later, on the 2nd of February, the official pathology results came back to the family. Daniel went on Instagram and shared the news in plain language. Isaac was officially stage 3, but the doctors had told the Colemans that their son was sitting right on the edge of stage 4 because of how fast the cancer was spreading. Even after the surgery, there was a very high chance that microscopic cancer was still living quietly inside him. The reason Isaac's treatment options were so painfully limited is the part that breaks many parents who hear this story for the first time. Because of his underlying genetic disorder, the standard cancer treatments that work for most kids are actually dangerous for him. Chemotherapy at normal doses can wipe out his bone marrow. Full-strength radiation can damage healthy DNA throughout the rest of his body. The very next day, the 3rd of February, Daniel did something that genuinely stunned hundreds of thousands of families across the country. He canceled the entire Danny Go live tour for the rest of the year. 65 sold-out shows, almost 200,000 tickets, an upcoming Netflix launch, and a wave of professional momentum that most creators wait an entire decade to feel, even once. He calmly set it all aside. Because being Isaac's dad came first, and it was not even close. But to understand why that decision did not surprise the closest fans, you have to go back to the December post where Daniel typed 5 quiet words that told the whole story. We always knew this day was coming. That December update had landed gently into people's feeds, almost hidden between cheerful holiday vacation photos. The Coleman family had just returned from a trip to the United Kingdom, and Daniel had shared some genuinely happy pictures from their travels. And then, almost in the same breath, he announced that Isaac had been diagnosed with cancer in his mouth. 5 quiet words from inside that post still echo for me every time I think about it. Daniel wrote that the family had always known this day was coming. Not that they had worried this might happen. Not that they had feared it. they had known with certainty. He explained that this kind of cancer is a near certainty with the rare disease his son had been born with. Mouth cancer is something most of us associate with much older adults living through very specific lifestyle factors. So how does a kid who has never even tasted alcohol get diagnosed with a stage 3 oral tumor before he is even old enough to learn how to drive a car? The answer lives inside the rare condition Isaac was born with. It is called Fanconi anemia, and it is one of the cruelest genetic disorders that modern medicine even knows about. Children born with Fanconi anemia have a deep problem with the way their cells repair their own DNA. Their bone marrow tends to fail in childhood, which is why so many of these kids need bone marrow transplants long before they ever hit puberty. But once they manage to survive that part of the journey, an even darker statistic quietly comes for them. The risk of head and neck cancer in Fanconi anemia patients is roughly 500 to 700 times higher than in the general population. And the painful truth is that Isaac's cancer was not actually his first medical war. By the time he heard the word tumor in his early teens, he had already survived more medical battles than most of us will ever face across a full lifetime. The 14-year war most people never saw. Isaac Daniel Coleman was born in early October of 2011 in North Carolina, weighing just a little over 3 pounds at birth. Within hours of arriving in the world, surgeons had to place a shunt in his brain. Within just a few days, he needed a colostomy. The list of complications kept growing from there. He was missing some bones in his arms. He had hearing loss and lived with hearing aids. He had bladder issues that required a catheter throughout much of his childhood. Before Daniel was ever a YouTube creator, he was simply the man writing fundraising letters to friends and family, begging them to donate to Fanconi anemia research. Back in 2014, years before Danny Go was even an idea, an archived letter on the official Fanconi Anemia Research Foundation website shows Daniel introducing himself simply as Isaac's daddy and asking people to support a cure. The advocacy was never some clever marketing campaign. It was a desperate father trying to buy his child more time on this earth. In 2016, Isaac received a bone marrow transplant. The chemotherapy that came alongside the transplant was risky for any Fanconi anemia patient, but it bought him precious years. The transplant also did something quietly important to his biology. It changed Isaac's DNA. From that point onward, his own biological family members were no longer his best biological matches for any future organ donation. This became a serious problem just a few years later, when his kidneys began to fail. In 2019, the Coleman family went on local Charlotte television, asking total strangers to consider donating a kidney for their 8-year-old son. Without a new kidney, Isaac was facing dialysis. The community responded with enormous generosity, and by early 2021, Isaac received his kidney transplant at a children's hospital in Cincinnati. That kidney bought him 5 more years of being a kid. Through every one of those years, Isaac was, by every account from his father, absolutely full of personality. He loved costumes. He bickered with his younger brother Levi the way every healthy sibling does. He carried what his dad would later call his trademark joy, the same exact word that would close out his tribute post on that May morning. But the most surprising piece of the entire Coleman family story is that the YouTube channel that would eventually make Daniel a household name did not even exist for most of Isaac's hardest medical battles. From a garage in North Carolina to millions of children. Before he was ever Danny Go, Daniel Coleman was a regular working dad with a normal corporate job in marketing. He spent nearly 13 years climbing the ladder at a major American home improvement retailer, eventually becoming a senior creative producer at the company. He won creative awards along the way. He learned how to write scripts, edit video, build a brand, and tell a story in under 2 minutes. Looking back at it now, those years feel almost like a quiet training program for what was coming next. In the summer of 2019, Daniel and 2 of his childhood best friends, Michael Finster and Matthew Paget, uploaded the very first Danny Go video to the internet. The 3 of them had been in a band together as kids growing up. They filmed most of the early stuff in a garage in front of a simple blue screen. They had no industry connections. They had no advertising budget. They simply had a strong instinct that kids in this generation needed a channel that was loud, musical, kind, and full of physical movement. In late 2022, on Isaac's 11th birthday, the channel released a song called "The Floor is Lava Dance." That one viral video changed everything for the family. The song racked up tens of millions of views. Subscribers poured in. Brands started calling. A live tour came together. By April of 2026, the show debuted on Netflix and sat alongside the biggest names in children's entertainment. But here is the angle in this story that almost always gets missed. When Daniel sat down for a local television interview back in 2023, the reporter asked him why he was even building this enormous platform in the first place. His answer had nothing to do with money or fame. He said there were causes he genuinely cared about, causes that had chosen him personally, like the bone marrow donor registry. He talked about how long his family had waited for a kidney for his oldest son. Read that piece carefully. From the very first video ever uploaded, Danny Go was secretly a Trojan horse for Fanconi anemia awareness, wrapped neatly inside a song about pretending the carpet is hot lava. The biggest professional week of Daniel's entire life was the very same week he was quietly watching his son slip away from him. The legacy of a boy who chose joy. Within 24 hours of his Instagram tribute, Daniel did one more public thing that tells you everything about who he really is. He shared a single quiet link in his story, directing fans who wanted to give in Isaac's memory to a campaign at the Fanconi Cancer Foundation. The page is titled simply, "In Loving Memory of Isaac Daniel Coleman." The Coleman family did not start a personal fundraiser for themselves. Every single donation goes directly toward research into the same rare disease that took their son away from them. That single choice tells you almost everything you need to know about who Daniel Coleman really is underneath all the bright costumes and dance songs. In the days that followed, the response from the broader children's entertainment world was the kind of moment that genuinely makes you believe the internet still has a real soul. Miss Rachel asked her entire audience to send love to the family. Blippi publicly mourned. Emma Watkins from The Wiggles sent her condolences too. Parents organized stream campaigns across TikTok and Reddit, leaving Danny Go videos quietly on loop in the background of their kitchens, just trying to push some support toward a family they had never even met, but somehow felt they truly knew. Daniel Coleman built an entire empire on performing fatherhood for other people's children. Millions of kids around the world have grown up with him as a kind of cheerful, energetic, dancing father figure on a glowing screen. But behind that screen, every single day for 14 straight years, he was also being the quietest, most patient, most fiercely loyal version of a real father to a son who needed him in a way most of us will never fully understand. There is something almost too painful about that contrast when you really sit with it. The dancing dad on the iPad was completely real. The grieving dad behind the camera was completely real too. They were the same exact man, the same heart, doing both impossible jobs at the same time. Isaac lived 14 years, 7 months, and 18 days on this earth. He outlived nearly every grim statistic a geneticist could have shown his parents on the day he was born. And until his very last weeks, he kept asking for one more costume change at the family photo shoot. That, in the end, is the trademark joy his father wrote about. That is the legacy worth remembering. If Isaac's story touched something in you the way it touched me, I would genuinely love to hear about it in the comments below. Drop a note for the Coleman family and let me know whether you have ever even heard of Fanconi anemia before today.